Good morning, everyone. I'm Poppy Harlow.
And I'm Jim Sciutto. From fleeing for their lives to falling in line. This morning, the January 6th bipartisan commission bill heads to the Senate, but its future is increasingly unclear. Despite overwhelmingly passing the House, including with 35 Republicans defying their leadership to vote in favor of the bill, Republican resistance in the Senate is growing. CNN has learned that Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is taking steps to bring the bill to the floor next week.
And if it fails, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is warning Democrats may go it alone, strongly signaling that she will approve a Democratic-led House Select Committee if the bipartisan bill fails in the upper chamber. With no part, it is inconceivable that some of the members we protect would downplay the events of January the 6th. Let's begin on Capitol Hill with our colleague Lauren Fox. When could we see a vote in the Senate on this?
Well, the expectation is it could come as soon as next week, Poppy. But look, this commission is now on life support as it heads to the U.S. Senate. That's because it's looking increasingly unlikely that there will be 10 Republican senators to back this bill. Without that support, this bill dies in the U.S. Senate. And that's exactly what things are starting to look like at this point, given the fact that there are so many objections in the Senate, including, and I think this is very significant, McConnell's objection yesterday, which he announced publicly. He'd been laying the groundwork for a couple of days with members, educating them behind the scenes, trying to explain how he believes some of the efforts were already being undertaken in key Senate committees. But look, this list is going to grow of members who are not going to support this bill or who are leaning against supporting the bill right now. You are hearing a litany of reasons that Republicans have, but I think an important one, and one that is underscoring all of this tension, is the fact that Republicans know that a commission is going to force them to talk about what happened on January 6th over and over again. That is a political liability moving into 2022. And you've heard some Republican senators, including John Thune, really acknowledge the fact that this commission would keep January 6th and what happened that day, including the big lie and former President Donald Trump, in the news for several more months. Just think back to that 9/11 commission report, how highly scrutinized the rollout that bill had, the rollout that the report had. I think that is the kind of fanfare that a lot of Republicans are very worried about as they look to try to take back the House and the Senate in 2022. That's not to say there aren't some members who are going to support this bill. Senator Lisa Murkowski, Senator Mitt Romney, both of them have suggested they could back it. But I think it's unclear right now if there would be those 10 votes, and it just doesn't seem like they exist at this point.
Lauren Fox, politics dominate on the Hill. As always, let's keep the conversation going with CNN senior political analyst John Avlon and former Republican Congressman Denver Riggleman. Mr. Riggleman, I wonder if I could begin with you. Representative Don Bacon, Republican, one of the 35 who voted for this commission, he said last night Democrats, quote, basically gave us what we wanted, including, for instance, changing the representation on this commission to an even number of Republicans and Democrats. So what kept more Republicans, or 83% of them, what had them voting against this? Is it fear of Donald Trump, who has called this commission a trap?
Yes, it's a political calculation. You know, I'm friends with Don. You know, he's a retired Air Force general. I didn't know if you knew that or not, Jim. And, you know, I'm an Air Force guy. And I know John Kakko very well. He's a dear friend. And, you know, I had even talked to John beforehand, and it seemed like they had gotten what they wanted. So, you know, I never like to be cautiously optimistic, but I thought that they would get over 30 votes. They did. But I thought it could be as high as 50, but it didn't get there. So this was a political calculation, and I find it interesting, and I want to say this very quickly, is that the further this can be pushed out, it might even be more detrimental, because the issue that you have is that Donald Trump is not going to let this go away. He's going to continue to push the stop the steal theatrics. So I just find it interesting that we're talking about a political calculation on the GOP side. We know that President Trump isn't going to let stop the steal go. You're going to still see these odd challenges like the cyber ninjas right down in Arizona. You're going to see sort of this ridiculous, you know, push from conspiracy theories from months ago. So again, I think that we need an aggregator. I think we need a commission to look at all the data. And if I could humbly submit, I would say let's just have two commissions, right? Let's just have one commission that says, hey, we were looking at 1/6, and another commission that looks at left and right wing ideologies and looks at digital polarization, radicalization, and violence. I think if we split up two committees, I think we could actually push forward something that could work for both parties.
I saw your tweet on that. We have a Democratic Congresswoman on, later in the show. We're going to ask her what she thinks of that idea. But just quickly before we move on to you, John Avalon, Congressman Ringelman, you want to be on this commission. You tweeted as much. I mean, that's what I read in your tweet. So would you subpoena McCarthy?
I think I would subpoena anybody where the data led, and that's the thing that I think that scares everyone. I don't think it's just McCarthy. I think it's a lot of people that data leads to very specific places. And I've done it for 2 decades, right? I've done social network analysis, pattern of life. We've looked at telephony, tracking people using cyber methodologies, right, or internet methodologies, using steganography. There's some things that you can do that are really just facts-based and data-based. And I don't want people to be afraid of that. If you're not afraid of that, the data is going to exonerate you. If you are afraid of that, you might not want this to happen. And I don't know what's in everybody's hearts, but again, this comes back to data. You have to have something that's unbiased and professional. I've done it for 2 decades, and that's really where I come from. Is a note to the Constitution, is also a note to integrity, and I hope that we could have a commission like that. But again, I don't think it's going to happen. I'm not trying to, I don't think it's going to happen.
The facts just might, frankly, make folks uncomfortable. What did Trump do and not do on that day? What did McCarthy say to him? What did he say to McCarthy? John Avalon, I wonder, playing devil's advocate here, should we be surprised that 83% of Republicans voted against this when 2/3 of the Republican caucus on the night of the violent insurrection still voted to decertify the election, which of course was the lie that fueled the violent insurrection, right? I mean, is that much of a change from where we were 4 months ago?
There are 2 low moments in the modern political history of our republic. But I think it's significant that 35 Republicans bucked House leadership, which was whipping this vote, calling people individually, begging them to back off the idea of an independent bipartisan commission. And they said, no way. This is bigger than your political needs and your personal fears, Leader McCarthy. And that's exactly the perspective that we need to carry forward in the House, in the Senate. I know Mitch McConnell has laid down the gauntlet. You had, people like Mike Rounds who said he didn't want to sweep this under the rug. Now we're busy sweeping. But you're going to need 10 to get to filibuster-proof majority. But if we can't agree after an attack on our Capitol that we need to reason together with a bipartisan commission, when so many of the arguments being raised are utterly BS, as John Katko said on the floor of the House in a speech yesterday, then we're in real trouble. Whatever it takes to get to yes, as long as it's got subpoena power and it's balanced, go for it. But this is much bigger than cynical politics, and that's the fight we see today. It's not just Trump versus truth. It's party over country.
Congressman Ringelman, I just want your response finally to what we heard Ohio Democratic Congressman Tim Ryan say, who's one of the leaders on all of this and figuring out what happened. Listen to him.
Benghazi, you guys chased the former Secretary of State all over the country, spent millions of dollars. We have people scaling the Capitol, hitting the Capitol Police with lead pipes across the head, and we can't get bipartisanship. What else has to happen in this country? Cops. This is a slap in the face to every rank and file cop in the United States. If we're going to take on China, if we're going to rebuild the country, if we're going to reverse climate change, we need 2 political parties in this country that are both living in reality, and you ain't one of them.
Is he right?
I think we do need 2 viable political parties, and I understand the frustration. Listen, the issue that you have when you talk about Benghazi, you talk about other commissions, why is 1-6 commission so important? And I know that people look at this politically, but it's so important is because data is perishable. If we're going to find out the linkages and what radicalized these individuals and how to stop disinformation flows, we got to look at the data and how people were contacting each other and how this metastasized. Companies don't hold data forever. I put that out also is that I've done this for so long that Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, everybody has different methodologies on how they hold their data, whether you text or not, what locational data, how long they keep that, which is different from the call detail records. And so I think what Tim is saying is that if we're going to be serious as a country, we need to seriously look at our own difficulties that we have here and our own weaknesses when it comes to data radicalization and what actually caused people to scale the walls at the Capitol. And I'm frankly a bit embarrassed, because looking at this, if we want to be a country of facts and integrity and identifying those dangers to us inside and outside. We need to understand what's happening within our country, and I think that's why Tim was so angry.
Yeah.
Thank you, Congressman Riggleman. Thank you, John Avlon, very much. Meanwhile, there is new legal trouble potentially mounting for former President Trump. The New York Attorney General's office has opened a criminal tax probe into the longtime chief financial officer of the Trump Organization, Alan Weisselberg. That's according to people familiar with the investigation, which they say has been going on into Weisselberg for months.
Sources tell CNN that prosecutors are trying to find leverage to convince Weisselberg to cooperate with authorities and help build a case against people higher up in the organization. That might, of course, include the man on the left-hand side of that screen. Let's bring in CNN's Kara Scannell. I mean, Weisselberg and Trump, deeply intertwined in the business practices of Trump Organization for years. Tell us the significance of prosecutors pushing him, perhaps showing him he has criminal exposure to convince him to cooperate.
Yeah, good morning, Jim and Poppy. This is definitely a pressure campaign here. They're looking into Alan Weisselberg's personal finances, examining many of these benefits that he had received over the years for working for the Trump Organization. Whether that was tuition for private school for his grandchildren, perks including apartments and car leases. So this is all now under scrutiny by the New York Attorney General's office. There's a small unit there that does have criminal jurisdiction. One of their focuses is tax, and they've been digging into this for several months. And this probe began in part because of information that they received from Alan Weisselberg's former daughter-in-law, Jennifer Weisselberg. She has been cooperating with authorities. She was married to Weisselberg's son, Barry Weisselberg, who also worked for the Trump Organization, and they had received a free apartment from the company for years. So this is now all under scrutiny by the New York Attorney General's office from that criminal probe looking at Alan Weisselberg personally. This certainly adds a lot of pressure to him because he is both someone who has, been a loyalist to Trump for more than 40 years. He's the chief financial officer of the company. He was one of the people put in charge, along with Donald Trump's sons, to run the company when Donald Trump became president. So he certainly is someone that is trusted, that knows the ins and outs of that company. And so there is a lot of pressure on him to cooperate. Now, this investigation, though, it is still ongoing. He's not been accused of any wrongdoing. He has cooperated before. He cooperated in the investigation to Michael Cohen, which did involve questions about how the Trump Organization reimbursed him. He is someone that has sat for depositions. He even met with the New York Attorney General's office last summer when they were conducting the civil investigation into the Trump Organization. Now that, as we reported yesterday, they've teamed up with the DA on the broader criminal investigation into the company. So this certainly just adds a lot of pressure here, but he has not been accused of any wrongdoing at this point. Jim, Poppy?
Listen, bringing up his cooperation in the Cohen case is notable. Cohen went to jail, right? And prosecutors going to prosecute. Kara Scannell, thanks very much. Still to come this hour, So the state of play right now for an independent, bipartisan, 9/11 style commission to investigate the deadly Capitol Hill insurrection. At least 10 Senate Republicans would have to go against their leadership's wishes to support a bill that the House just passed. At this point, only 5 GOP senators have said they may be a yes. So the math not quite there yet. With me now, Democratic Congresswoman Jennifer Wexton of Virginia. Congresswoman, thank you for taking the time this morning.
Thanks for having me.
So yesterday, 35 Republican colleagues of yours did buck their leadership to vote for this bipartisan commission, which was negotiated by Democratic and Republican members. But 83% of the GOP caucus voted against. I wonder what's driving this. The president calls the commission a trap. Is it fear of Trump that led them to these no votes?
Well, it's very disappointing that more Republicans didn't sign on to this wonderful legislation to get to the bottom of what happened on January 6th and really figure out so that it never happens again. Now, what's driving them, I can't say. It certainly seems that they're afraid to find the truth because the truth may be inconvenient for them.
I wonder, one of the crucial questions remains what the president did and said on that day. We know that the GOP leader McCarthy spoke to him. What did the president say or not say to the Pentagon? Do you believe President Trump has something to hide?
Well, I don't know why he wouldn't want to get to the bottom of what happened and make sure that it never happens again. And the truth will come out one way or another. It's just a matter of whether we're going to do it through this wonderful bipartisan, nonpartisan commission that has the imprimatur of of great gravitas and the ability to really get to the bottom of it. We don't want it to be partisan. You know, that was part of the negotiations between the chairman and the ranking member of Homeland Security, and it is now completely bipartisan, and there should be no problem with getting to the bottom of what happened.
Yeah. One option which is being discussed is Democrats going it alone if they can't get the 10 Republican votes in the Senate, much as Republicans did with the Benghazi investigation for years. Have you reached that point, do you think, that you would do your own investigation and dig as far as and long as you want on your own?
No, we haven't. You know, we want this to be bipartisan or nonpartisan, and we're going to keep fighting to make that happen.
Okay. You have been personally working very closely with one of the victims of this. That's a fallen Capitol Hill officer, Howie Liebengood. He took his own life on January 9th, just 3 days after the insurrection. And his family is urging Congress to act. I'm going to quote briefly from their statement. They said, "We believe a thorough, nonpartisan investigation into the root causes of and the response to the January 6th riot is essential for our nation to move forward. Howie's death was an immediate outgrowth of those events. Every officer who worked that day, as well as their families, should have a better understanding of what happened." Tell me how the family views that vote yesterday. How disappointed are they?
Well, you know, they want this to be nonpartisan and they want it to move forward. So I think that they're pleased that there was bipartisan support for it. I think they would have liked to see more support. But one of the things that we can really see, you know, whether our friends across the aisle truly want to back the blue is on today's security supplemental. You know, that contains a lot of resources for the Capitol Police. I'm very, very pleased that it contains additional supports for their mental health wellness unit, and that it's going to be renamed in honor of Howie Liebengood, the Howie Liebengood Capitol Police Wellness Center, and it's going to have funding for 6 new mental health therapists, as well as many other supports that the Capitol Police need moving forward.
We've been showing pictures of him on the air as you've been speaking, describing him. He just looks like a lovely guy. It's sorry to see him as one of the victims of this.
He really was. He really was, and he had a long history here in the Senate. His father was the sergeant at arms at the Senate when he was growing up, and he and his siblings used to run around and play here in the rotunda and in the Capitol when they were growing up. Howie was also a Senate page, and he was a 15-year veteran of the Capitol Police. So I hope that our friends across the aisle will want to support the security supplemental, and I hope that Mitch McConnell and the Republicans in the Senate will do the same.
Can your Republican colleagues truly back the blue if they're not willing to delve into the causes of January 6th and to working on preventing a repeat?
I don't think that they can. You know, I mean, we heard from the Capitol Police yesterday that they support the commission and they want to get to the bottom of what happened. You know, they don't appreciate this being swept under the rug and our colleagues saying things like, oh, it was just another day with regular tourists coming to the Capitol, because that really disrespects all that the Capitol Police did to protect us that day. They were involved in hand-to-hand combat for hours. Many of them are still out, you know, with injuries, broken back, gouged out eyes, you know, broken bones, injuries that have lasted for months. So we need to show them the respect and thank you and thanks for their sacrifices and all that they've done for us.
Well, that's what the video showed and captured, violent attack on those officers. Congresswoman Jennifer Wexton, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, Dr. Anthony Fauci tells CNN, in his words, it's, quote, highly likely Americans will need coronavirus vaccine boosters within about a year. More on why next.
So would you like some good news? There is more good news in the fight against COVID. Listen for it. The U.S. is seeing some of the lowest numbers of new infections and deaths in nearly a year. But over the past 14 days, the number of vaccine doses administered is down more than 16%. This says only about 38% of the population is now fully vaccinated.
That's concerning some experts who now say a booster shot will likely be necessary. Listen to this.
When the level of protection starts to dwindle down, as happens over time, or when we start seeing more breakthrough infections, you're going to see boosters. There's a major increase in the level of antibodies following a booster.
Okay, Dr. Colleen Kraft is with us, Associate Chief Medical Officer at Emory University Hospital. Good morning, Dr. Kraft. So that's what Fauci says, the authoritative source, obviously, on all this stuff. It's been really echoed by the CEO of Pfizer, Alberto Bourla, saying that's what they're seeing evidence of. Dr. Lena Wen, who we have on next hour, is really warning against, calls for a booster at this point. Can you explain how we know as a public? Is it that people would start getting sick who've already been vaccinated like a year from now or 6 months from now? Or is it that these trials have extended out and in a few months we'll know what those trials say?
Yeah, Poppy, I think it's probably a combination of both. I think we'll know more about the longevity of the immunity to the current vaccines over time as more people have testing farther away from their actual vaccine. And then I think a lot of what's going to happen this summer is going to predict really where we are as a country. So what our percent vaccine rate is going to be, even among children. And then also, sort of the social norms. I think the longer that this lasts, the longer that we're perpetuating cases and transmission, the more likely we will need a booster.
Dr. Kraft, we had Dr. Paul Offit on earlier this week, who makes the point, a hopeful one, which I don't mind emphasizing, that yes, 38% of the country fully vaccinated. The number of folks who are partially vaccinated, closer to 50%, I think 60% for adults. But when you add that to the figure of people who were exposed and have some immunity and were not vaccinated, that we're closer as a country to herd immunity than some of those numbers show. Perhaps 50, 60%. And I just wonder if you subscribe to that view as well.
Well, I think that what's happening around us is sort of going to be what's going to tell us whether herd immunity is achieved or not. I think we don't really know what herd immunity is for this novel coronavirus. We have lots of predictions based on other viruses, other infections that we know, but we don't for sure know. And so I think just watching the numbers go down, is that because it's getting warmer and people are outside and they're transmitting it less, or is it really due to the fact that we've sort of achieved this level of natural immunity and vaccine-induced immunity that's actually going to really prevent transmission?
I want to talk about schools and masks, because you've got Utah and Texas now banning mask mandates in schools. It's mandated in my kid's school. I'm sure Jim's kid's school. It's going to be next year as well for ours. But you've got this fight, which is odd over it now, when the American Academy of Pediatrics just came out this week and said children should continue wearing masks in public spaces as they have throughout the pandemic, particularly when social distancing is impossible. So I guess I just wonder what you make of the fact that you're going to now have a fight in our schools about this.
Yeah, I think the word that you used, right. I think the word that you used as odd is how I feel about this. I'm not really sure what the motivation is, what we're learning from this. I think we've proven the fact that if we wear a mask, we're going to just prevent that transmission. If I wear it and I'm ill, I'm going to prevent the transmission to you. And so when we've talked about easing up on masking guidelines for vaccinated people, that makes sense to me, right? So we think that the risk of transmission from a vaccinated person who doesn't have symptoms is negligible. And so it's confusing to me that why the masks are coming off in the school. My school also mandates masks for people that are not vaccinated, teachers or children. And so it's a little confusing. I'm not sure if it's, trying to get to the point where we want normalcy. Is it for the children? It's unclear to me sort of the rationale behind that decision.
You could make an argument it's flat out negligent, can't you? Because kids are not vaccinated yet.
That's right.
I mean, we only just got authorization for 12 to 15-year-olds. Forget folks under 12. I mean, it's nuts.
I find it very confusing. I completely agree, Jim. I'm not really sure. In my own school system, our small school, we allowed vaccinated teachers to take off their masks in the last week because of the CDC guidance. However, all children none of them are vaccinated, are all wearing masks, and it's already easing that tension of everyone wearing masks. And so I'm not sure why we can't sort of still have this dichotomy of masked and unmasked until we're all vaccinated to just prevent transmission. So it is very confusing. I would love to have like the one-liner or really the sort of support of why that is happening, why that mandate was lifted, and then why we're charging people or businesses $1,000, if you have a mask mandate.
It's politics trumping silence, frankly. I mean, the point of taking masks off, the justification is because you're vaccinated. I mean, that's what the CDC says, and now it's crazy. But, you know, apparently folks not willing to protect their kids, right? Dr.
If you were wondering how Jim felt about it, now you know. And I stand with him on that.
Nuts. Dr. Colleen Kraft, thanks very much.
Thank
Growing calls from the White House.
Legal defense that keeps coming up again and again. Trump made me do it. John Avalon with a reality check.
The lawyer for the so-called QAnon shaman raised a lot of eyebrows when he floated this odd defense. Quote, a lot of the defendants, they're all effing short bus people, Albert Watkins told TPM. These are people with brain damage. They're bad people. They were subjected to 4+ years of goddamn propaganda, the likes of which the world hadn't seen since effing Hitler. Now, there's a lot to unpack there, but Watkins seems to be arguing that his client was easily duped, misled by the constant lies from Donald Trump and right-wing media, incited to riot. Now, this is all obviously offensive, especially to the developmentally disabled, but it's not isolated. In fact, it seems to be part of a pattern. Because earlier this month, the attorney for accused Capitol Hill attacker said his client suffered from foxitis, that after watching the channel constantly air Trump's false claims of a stolen election, he, quote, believed what was being fed to him. So the client shouted, "You want war? We got war. It's 1776 all over again." And then allegedly stormed the Capitol wearing a bulletproof vest and wielding a stolen riot shield. The defense that rioters were just following orders from Trump has become a regular refrain. For example, Garrett Miller, charged with invading the Capitol and threatening to assassinate Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, said, "I believed I was following the instructions of former President Trump. He had me believing that an American election was stolen." Likewise, the lawyer for Proud Boy Dominic Pizzola said he now realizes he was duped into these mistaken beliefs. But the lies didn't only derange people who attacked the Capitol. One of the very few cases of confirmed voter fraud this election came from a Pennsylvania man named Bruce Bartman, who tried to cast a ballot in his dead mother's name for Donald Trump. Now, he told the judge, "I listened to too much propaganda and made a stupid mistake." So the common defense is that these folks were duped by lies. And not coincidentally, that's the same defense we're hearing from some of the prime propagators of that propaganda, like pro-Trump lawyer Sidney Powell, who's facing a massive defamation suit for spreading the big lie. Powell's defense is literally that no reasonable person would ever believe her bogus claims. Therefore, the people who did believe her, and there are many of them, were by definition not reasonable. They were easily duped fools. And while Powell's defense seems novel, it's almost exactly what lawyers for pro-Trump conspiracy theorist Alex Jones argued back in 2018. Look, big lies can't withstand the scrutiny of court. It's a place of truth and consequences. But what does the persistence of the big lie say about the people who still parrot it? After all, it's the litmus test for Republican leadership now and believed by a majority of their party. We see it in the pathetic attempt to rewrite history from Republican lawmakers like Georgia's Andrew Clyde.
There was no insurrection, and to call it an insurrection, in my opinion, is a bold-faced lie.
Which is absurd, even without the photograph of Clyde desperately trying to barricade the door of the House that day. Which begs the question, does Clyde think his supporters are stupid? And if you're a person who still buys into the big lie, what does it mean that so many of your fellow travelers are now saying they were essentially brainwashed, while some of the big lie's most prominent pushers argue that no reasonable person could believe their toxic nonsense? They're saying that you're a useful idiot who can be milked for more money and political advantage as the grift goes on. There's an old saying in poker that applies. If you look around the table and can't tell who the sucker is, it's you. But this isn't a game. It's our democracy. And that's your reality check.
John Avalon, thank you very much. So just into CNN, a brand